The Grand Plaza Hotel ballroom sparkled with crystal chandeliers and the glitter of New York's elite. But Olivia Reed felt only the weight of her diamond wedding ring heavy as the contract that had placed it there. 6 hours ago, she had walked down the aisle of St. Michael's Cathedral in a designer gown that cost more than her apartment, marrying a man she'd met exactly 25 days earlier. Dominic Westfield stood across the reception hall, his tall frame impeccable in a tailored tuxedo as he charmed investors with that calculated smile that never quite reached his eyes. Those piercing blue eyes occasionally flicked toward her, monitoring her performance as his bride with the same scrutiny he applied to his real estate acquisitions. "You've done well for yourself," whispered a voice beside her. Olivia turned too. Find an elegantly dressed woman with a champagne flute and a smile that seemed genuine. "I'm Patricia, Dominic's godmother. The only person who still remembers when he used to build sandcastles instead of skyscrapers." Olivia's shoulders relaxed slightly. "It's lovely to meet you. My dear, you look like someone who needs rescuing from this circus. Come, walk with me." They drifted toward the terrace overlooking Manhattan's glittering skyline. Once alone, Patricia's expression softened. "He's not easy to love, our Dominic, but he's worth loving, despite everything." "Our arrangement doesn't require love," Olivia replied carefully. Patricia's laugh was gentle. "Of course. The prenuptial agreement, the 1-year contract, the inheritance clause, all very proper and businesslike." She patted Olivia's hand. "Just remember that contracts can be renegotiated when circumstances change." Before Olivia could respond, Dominic appeared at the doorway. "Patricia, I see you've met my wife. I was just telling her how radiant she looks. A perfect match for Westfield Enterprises." Patricia kissed his cheek and whispered something that made his jaw tighten. Before she glided back into the reception, Dominic's expression was unreadable as he approached Olivia. "We leave in 10 minutes. Say your goodbyes." Later that night, Olivia stood in the vast living room of Dominic's penthouse, still in her wedding dress, watching her husband pour himself a generous whiskey. The silence between them stretched taut as a piano wire. "I hope the performance met your standards," she finally said, removing her veil. "You were convincing enough." Dominic loosened his bow tie, transforming from polished businessman to something more dangerous, more human. "Though your conversation with Jonathan Pierce lasted longer than necessary." Olivia froze. "He approached me about my music. He mentioned he'd seen me perform at Carnegie Hall last year." "Did he mention he's also the son of Edward Pierce, my chief competitor for the Riverside Development Project?" Dominic's voice remained even, but she sensed the storm beneath. "Curious timing, isn't it? Our wedding, the final bid deadline next week, ... The accusation hung in the air between them. Olivia felt her cheeks flush with indignation. "I didn't know who he was. We talked about Chopin, not your business dealings." Dominic set down his glass and closed the distance between them. Up close, she could see the tiny flecks of silver in his blue eyes, the faint stubble on his jaw. Despite her anger, her body responded to his proximity with a traitorous awareness. "Our agreement was clear, Olivia. 1 year of marriage, no complications, and your father's debts disappear." His fingers brushed a loose strand of hair from her face, the touch electric. "But if I discover you're working against me, the consequences will extend far beyond financial ruin." "I'm not your enemy, Dominic." She met his gaze without flinching. "I've kept my part of the bargain. We'll see." He stepped back, leaving her skin tingling where he'd touched her. "Your room is down the hall. Mine is at the opposite end. I suggest we keep it that way." As he walked away, Olivia's phone buzzed. With a text from an unknown number, "The game begins, pianist. Play your part beautifully, and freedom awaits." The king has many enemies, including those he trusts most. Olivia stared at the message, a chill running through her veins. She was caught in something larger and more dangerous than a loveless marriage, and she had no idea who was orchestrating her moves or why. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, Manhattan glittered like 1,000 promises. But within these walls of glass and steel, Olivia knew she'd traded one prison for another. And this one came with a warden whose touch she couldn't quite forget, even as she feared what he might do next. The Westfield Enterprises boardroom hummed with tension as Olivia sat in the corner, a silent observer to the power plays unfolding before her. 3 weeks into her marriage, and already she felt like an exhibit in a museum of corporate intrigue examined. Judged, but never truly seen. Dominic commanded the head of the table, his presence magnetic as he addressed the gathering of executives. His voice remained steady as he announced, "The Riverside project bid was rejected this morning." The room erupted in murmurs. Billions in potential revenue gone. Olivia watched her husband's face, marble smooth despite the catastrophe. Only the slight whitening of his knuckles on the table's edge betrayed his rage. How did Pierce undercut? "U.S.?" demanded Victor Lancaster, the silver-haired CFO. "Our proposal was airtight." "Someone provided them with our exact numbers," Dominic replied, his gaze sweeping the room before landing, briefly but unmistakably, on Olivia. Her stomach tightened. She'd done nothing wrong, yet guilt by association clung to her like perfume. "Perhaps," came a honeyed voice from across the table, "we should discuss the coincidences that have occurred since certain new additions to our family." Cassandra Hawthorne, Dominic's head of legal affairs, smiled at Olivia with lips painted the precise color of fresh blood. Her elegant fingers tapped a folder in front of her. "That's enough, Cassandra," Dominic cut in. "Is it?" Cassandra's perfectly shaped eyebrow arched. 3 meetings with Jonathan Pierce in 2 weeks. Documented, photographed, undeniable. Those were chance encounters. Olivia found her voice, though it trembled slightly. "He frequents the same coffee shop near the conservatory, where I practice." "How convenient," Cassandra purred. "I said enough." Dominic's tone left no room for argument. "The meeting is adjourned until we have concrete information." As the room emptied, Olivia remained seated, feeling the weight of suspicious glances. When only she and Dominic remained, she confronted him. "You think I betrayed you?" "I think," he said carefully, "that the timing is suspicious. I've never even seen your bid documents. I don't have access to your files." "No," he agreed, approaching her with deliberate steps. "But you have access to me." The implication stung worse than an outright accusation. "I've shared nothing with Pierce. Our conversations were public and innocent." Yet somehow he knew exactly what to offer. Dominic stopped inches from her chair. "Exactly how to structure the financing to edge us out. And you immediately suspect me." Olivia stood, refusing to be loomed over. "Your wife of 3 weeks, rather than any of the dozens of executives who've worked with you for years." Something flickered in his eyes, doubt, perhaps. Before he could respond, his phone chimed. He glanced at it, and his expression darkened. "The board is calling for an emergency session tomorrow. They want to discuss the status of our marriage." "What?" He showed her the screen, an email from Cassandra detailing concerns about the hasty nature of the Westfield marriage and its potential impact on shareholder confidence. "She's coming for you," Dominic said bluntly. "And by extension me." Olivia's phone buzzed in her purse. The same unknown number. "The Queen is in check. Time to sacrifice a pawn to save her position." "What does that mean?" Dominic asked, reading over her shoulder. "I don't know." Olivia's hands trembled. "I've been receiving these messages since our wedding night. I thought they were wrong numbers or pranks." Dominic took her phone, scrolling through the mysterious texts with growing concern. Someone's playing us against each other. The question is who and why. That evening, alone in her wing of the penthouse, Olivia played her piano, fingers drawing. Comfort from Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major. The music filled the empty spaces of her gilded cage, offering temporary solace. She didn't hear Dominic enter until he spoke. "My mother played that piece." Olivia's fingers faltered on the keys. "I didn't know you were listening." "I always listen." He moved closer, his presence altering the atmosphere of the room. "Even when you think I'm not paying attention." He placed a folder on the piano. "Cassandra compiled this. Thought I should see it before tomorrow's meeting." Inside were photos of Olivia and Jonathan at various cafes, his hand occasionally touching hers, their heads bent close in conversation. In one image, he appeared to be showing her something on his laptop. "This looks damning," she admitted. "It's meant to." Dominic's voice held unexpected weariness. "The question is whether it's the truth." Olivia closed the folder. "He was showing me recordings of pianists. We were discussing techniques, not corporate espionage." Dominic studied her face with unsettling intensity. "I want to believe you. Then believe me." She stood, closing the distance between them. "I didn't marry you to destroy you, Dominic." His hand rose to her face, thumb tracing her cheekbone with surprising gentleness. For a moment, the mask slipped, revealing vulnerability beneath his controlled exterior. "Then why did you marry me, Olivia?" "Besides the money." "Because," she whispered, "sometimes a gilded cage seems better than drowning in the open sea." Something shifted in his eyes, recognition, perhaps? Understanding. His gaze dropped to her lips, and for a breathless moment, Olivia thought he might kiss her. Instead, both their phones buzzed simultaneously. The same message on both screens. The king and queen draw closer. How sweet. But remember, in chess, when royalty falls in love, they become vulnerable. The real game begins tomorrow. Check your father's old office, Olivia. The evidence you need is where he always kept his secrets. They stared at each other, the intimacy of the moment shattered by the intrusion of an unseen player, someone who knew not just their movements, but the geography of Olivia's past. "My father's office has been sealed since his death," she breathed. "No one should know about it. Someone does." Dominic's expression hardened into resolve. "And tomorrow, we find out who's been manipulating us both." Rain lashed against the windows of the cab as it wound through the pre-dawn streets toward Brooklyn. Beside Olivia, Dominic stared silently at his phone, tracking the emergency board meeting scheduled for 8 a.m., a meeting they had decided to miss. "You realize," he said without looking up, "that by not appearing, we're essentially handing Cassandra control of the narrative. We need to find the truth more than we need to defend against her lies," Olivia replied, watching her childhood neighborhood emerge through the streaked glass. The taxi stopped before a modest, brownstone sandwiched between newer developments. Remnant of old New York resisting the tide of gentrification. Olivia's hand trembled slightly as she unlocked the door to the building where she'd grown up, where her father had taught her to play piano in their small living room, where he had died alone while she was away at a competition. "Third floor," she said, leading Dominic up creaking stairs. "My father kept his office separate from our apartment. Said he needed space between work and home." The narrow hallway ended at a door with peeling paint. Inside, dust sheets covered sparse furniture, and the smell of old books and neglect hung. In the air, Dominic moved through the space with uncharacteristic respect, noting the diplomas on the wall. "Your father was an economics professor?" "And a financial consultant," Olivia added, heading toward an antique desk in the corner. "Until the scandal." "What scandal?" She paused, hand on the desk drawer. "He was accused of embezzling from the university's endowment fund. The charges were eventually dropped, but his reputation was destroyed. He never worked in finance again. That's not in any of the background checks I ran on you. The records were sealed as part of a settlement. Olivia knelt before the bottom drawer, removing a false panel to reveal a hidden compartment. My father was many things, but he wasn't a thief. Someone set him up. The hidden space contained a small fireproof box. Olivia's fingers traced the keyhole. The key should be ... behind the family photo. Dominic finished for her, already lifting the frame from the wall. That's where I'd hide it. Sure enough, taped to the back of a faded photograph of Olivia at her first recital was a small key. Something about Dominic's intuition made her pause. How did you know? A shadow crossed his face. My father had similar hiding places. Men with secrets often think alike. The box opened with a soft click, revealing folders of documents, a USB drive, and several old photographs. On top lay a sealed envelope addressed simply. For Olivia, when the music stops. Her hands shook as she broke the seal and read, "My dearest daughter, if you're reading this, I've failed to protect you from the truth. The disgrace that ended my career wasn't random. It was orchestrated by someone seeking revenge for a past I've tried to escape. The Westfield family and the Hawthorns have been locked in a silent war for generations. And somehow I became collateral damage. The woman who destroyed me was Elaine, Hawthorne Cassandra's mother, who blamed me for exposing financial irregularities in her husband's firm. What she never knew was that I was only following orders from someone inside the Westfield organization. I've gathered evidence over the years, proof that could destroy both families. I kept it as insurance to protect you. But if you found this, then my protection has failed. Trust no one completely, my darling, especially those with the Hawthorne name. All my love." That Olivia handed the letter to Dominic, watching his expression harden as he read. "Cassandra never mentioned this connection," he said finally. "Would you, if your family had destroyed an innocent man's career?" Olivia began examining the other documents' bank statements showing transfers between Westfield and Hawthorne accounts, emails referencing the Reed situation, photos of her father with a younger Elaine Hawthorne at various events. "My family used yours," Dominic said flatly. "And now Cassandra is using you again to get to me. The question is why?" Olivia inserted the USB drive into her laptop. "And how this connects to our marriage." The drive contained folders of surveillance photos, Dominic at various business meetings, Olivia at her performances, even shots of them separately entering the lawyer's office where they'd first met to discuss their marriage contract. "Someone has been watching us for months," Dominic murmured, his shoulder pressed against hers as they scrolled through the images. "Long before we met." The final folder was labeled simply Endgame. Inside was a single document, a complete dossier on the Riverside Development Project, including confidential details that only someone inside Westfield Enterprises could know. "This is what Pierce used to outbid us," Dominic said, voice tight with controlled rage. "But how did your father have it?" "He didn't." Olivia pointed to the file's creation date 3 days ago, years after her father's death. "Someone planted this here for us to find." Their phones chimed simultaneously with new messages. "Finding the breadcrumbs, I see. Now you know the players, but not the game. The board meeting has begun without you." Tick-tock. Attached was a live stream link. When they clicked it, they saw the Westfield boardroom, where Cassandra stood presenting evidence of Olivia's corporate espionage to the assembled executives. Clearly married Dominic to gain access to company secrets, she was saying, gesturing to the same photos they'd just discovered. And his absence today confirms his complicity, or, at minimum, his compromised judgment. Dominic's face hardened as he watched Victor Lancaster nod in agreement. "My own CFO, turning against me. They're voting to remove you." Olivia whispered as they watched hands raise around the table. Dominic closed the laptop with decisive finality. Let them try. He turned to her, his expression transformed by a new resolve. For the first time since their wedding, he looked at her not as a business arrangement, but as a partner. You and I have been manipulated into this marriage by forces that have been moving for decades, he said, taking her hand. But now we have something they didn't. Count on. What's that? His grip tightened. Each other? The intensity in his eyes sent heat coursing through her veins. Without warning, he pulled her against him, his mouth finding hers in a kiss that contained none of the calculation of their relationship thus far, only raw need and a surprising tenderness. When they broke apart, breathless, Olivia saw something new in his face. Determination, yes, but also a vulnerability that made him infinitely more human. We have 4 hours before they file the paperwork to formalize the vote, he said. 4 hours to find who's been playing us both and why. Where do we start? Dominic picked up a photo from the box. Elaine Hawthorne with her arm around a much younger Cassandra, standing on the steps of an impressive Manhattan brownstone. We start with the source. It's time I paid my former fiancée's mother a visit. The Hawthorne mansion stood like an aristocratic dowager among the gleaming modern towers of the Upper East Side proud, imposing and unapologetically old money. Olivia felt woefully underdressed as she and Dominic were led through the marble foyer by a stoic butler. Mr. Westfield and Mrs. Westfield to see Mrs. Hawthorne, the butler announced, the emphasis on Mrs. carrying subtle disapproval. Elaine Hawthorne reclined on an antique chaise in a sunroom, overlooking an immaculate garden. At 65, she remained strikingly beautiful, with the same auburn hair as her daughter, though silver, now threaded. Through it like expensive highlights. Dominic. Her smile was glacial. How unexpected. And you've brought your ... bride. Elaine? Dominic's tone was equally cold. We need to talk about your daughter's vendetta against my wife. The older woman laughed, a sound like crystal cracking. Always so direct. Please, sit tea? No. Dominic remained standing. I want to know why your family destroyed Professor Reed's career 15 years ago. Elaine's composure flickered. Her gaze shifted to Olivia with new interest. So that's who you are. Henry Reed's daughter. I should have seen the resemblance. You ruined my father, Olivia said quietly. Why? Business, my dear. Nothing personal. Elaine's dismissive wave made Olivia's blood boil. Your father was investigating irregularities in my husband's accounting. We simply redirected his attention. By framing him for embezzlement, Dominic finished. At my father's request, this caught Elaine off guard. You know about that? I'm learning. His jaw tightened. Just as I'm learning about your daughter's current manipulation of my company. Elaine set down her teacup with deliberate care. Cassandra makes her own decisions now. Has for years. Does she? Olivia stepped forward. Or is she still following the family playbook? Using me to get to Dominic, just like you used my father to protect your husband? A tense silence filled the room. Finally, Elaine sighed. You've clearly found Henry's little collection of evidence. What do you want from me? The truth, Dominic demanded. All of it? Elaine studied them both, calculation evident in her eyes. Very well, but not because I owe you anything. Because I want you to understand the game you're playing. She rose and moved to a small writing desk, retrieving a key from her jewelry box. The Westfields and Hawthorns were business partners once, decades ago. Your grandfather and my father-in-law built an empire together after the war, until Gregory Westfield betrayed Charles Hawthorne, cutting him out of the most profitable ventures. Ancient history, Dominic dismissed. Is it? Elaine unlocked a drawer and withdrew a yellowed newspaper. Clipping. When your father took control of Westfield Enterprises, He discovered something Charles Hawthorne had hidden evidence of tax fraud that could have destroyed both families. Instead of exposing it, he used it as leverage. She handed the clipping to Dominic. It detailed the suicide of Charles Hawthorne, found dead in his office after allegations of financial misconduct surfaced. "My husband's father didn't kill himself," Elaine continued, voice tight. "He was murdered made to look like suicide after Richard Westfield threatened to expose him." Dominic's face paled. "My father wouldn't he?" Elaine's smile was bitter. "Ask yourself what kind of man arranges his son's marriage to clear a path to acquisition targets." The accusation hung in the air. Olivia looked at Dominic, seeing the doubt in his eyes. "The inheritance clause in your grandfather's will," she said slowly. "The reason you needed to marry by your 35th birthday was my father's addition to the trust," Dominic finished, realization dawning. "He amended the conditions after my grandfather's death, created the deadline. And then," Elaine added, "he began suggesting suitable candidates, including my Cassandra. Until I discovered she was leaking information to competitors," Dominic said. Elaine laughed. "Is that what you think happened?" "Oh, Dominic." She was following. Richard's orders to test your loyalty. When you cast her aside, you failed his test." Olivia's mind raced. "So the marriage contract with me was orchestrated from the beginning," Elaine confirmed. "Richard needed you compromised, under his control, before he stepped down. A wife with significant debt, no connections, no power someone easily manipulated. By planting evidence of espionage," Dominic concluded, "he could force me to either divorce Olivia or defend her, either way, demonstrating whether my loyalty was to the company or my own interests. But he didn't count on Cassandra's jealousy," Olivia added. "She wasn't content to play her part. She wanted revenge." Elaine's smile turned sad. "My daughter never stopped loving you, Dominic, even after you humiliated her. When Richard approached her with this plan, she agreed, but with her own agenda." Their phones chimed with new messages. "Time's up. The vote is complete. Dominic Westfield has been removed as CEO of Westfield Enterprises, effective immediately. The Queen has fallen. Long live the King." Attached was a photo of Richard Westfield entering the boardroom, looking triumphant. "He planned this all along," Dominic said, voice hollow. "Create a crisis, sweep in as the savior, and sacrifice us both in the process." Olivia added. Elaine watched them with something approaching pity. "What will you do now? Your company is gone. Your reputation is in tatters." Dominic turned to Olivia, something fierce and determined in his gaze. "We'll do what they never expected." He took her hand. "We'll fight together." As they left the Hawthorne mansion, Olivia felt Dominic's fingers intertwined with hers, not for show, not for business, but as a lifeline connecting them against the storm. "My father kept records of everything," he said as they entered the car, "including, I suspect, whatever he's holding over the board members to force this vote. Where would he keep them?" Dominic's smile was grim. "In the one place I was never allowed to enter as a child. His private vault at the family estate." As they drove toward the Westfield country house, Olivia studied her husband's profile, the determined set of his jaw, the intelligence in his eyes. She realized with startling clarity that sometime during this chaotic day her feelings had transformed. What had begun as a business arrangement, then evolved into an alliance of convenience, had become something dangerously close to genuine. Affection. When Dominic caught her watching him, the look they shared held none of their earlier suspicion, only shared purpose and a heat that had nothing to do with revenge. "Whatever we find," he said quietly, "whatever happens next, I want you to know I don't regret our marriage anymore." "Neither do I," she admitted, surprising herself with the truth of it. His hand found hers again, thumb tracing circles on her palm. When this is over, perhaps we could renegotiate our terms. Create a new contract. What kind of terms did you have in mind? His eyes darkened, the kind that don't expire after a year. The promise in his words made her breath catch. Before she could respond, they arrived at the gates of the Westfield estate and the final confrontation that awaited them inside. The Westfield boardroom fell silent as the double doors swung open. Olivia entered first, chin high, followed by Dominic, whose expression betrayed nothing of the turmoil of the past 24 hours. Richard Westfield froze mid-sentence at the head of the table, the position that had been his son's until that morning. Cassandra's face drained of color. Around the table, board members shifted uncomfortably. "I believe," Dominic said calmly, "you're in my seat, Father." Richard recovered quickly, his smile tightening. "The board has voted, Dominic. Your impulsive marriage and subsequent mismanagement of the Riverside deal left us no choice." "Interesting timing," Dominic replied, moving forward to place a flash drive on the table. "Especially considering what we found in your private vault." The elder Westfield's composure slipped. "You had no right." "I had every right," Dominic cut him off. "As did my wife, whose father you destroyed to protect your arrangement with the Hawthorns." Olivia stepped forward, addressing the board directly. "Mr. Westfield orchestrated our marriage, then sabotaged it to create a crisis of leadership. This flash drive contains proof, including his communications with Cassandra Hawthorne Planning." "My supposed espionage." Cassandra stood abruptly. "That's absurd. I would never—" "Save it," Dominic interrupted. "We have your emails, Cassandra. Your meetings with Jonathan Pierce, arranging for him to accidentally encounter Olivia. The transfer of confidential information that cost us the Riverside project." Victor Lancaster, the CFO, cleared his throat. "These are serious allegations against the interim CEO, Dominic. Do you have proof? Beyond the documents my father so carefully preserved?" Dominic smiled thinly. "Yes, we have a confession." The doors opened again, and Elaine Hawthorne entered, elegant and composed. "Good morning, Richard. It's been some time." Richard Westfield's face contorted with rage. What is she doing here? "Telling the truth, for once," Elaine replied. She turned to the board. "I can confirm that Richard Westfield orchestrated this entire situation. The marriage, the sabotage, all of it to regain control of the company without publicly undermining his son." Murmurs spread around the table. Cassandra stared at her mother in betrayal. "Mother, what are you doing?" "Ending a blood feud that's destroyed too many lives already," Elaine replied simply. "Including your father's." For the next hour, Olivia and Dominic presented their evidence methodically. Richard's manipulations of the board, his decades-long rivalry with the Hawthorns, his orchestration of Henry Reed's downfall, all laid bare in devastating detail. When they finished, the silence was deafening. Finally, Lancaster spoke. "I move to reinstate Dominic Westfield as CEO, effective immediately, and to accept Richard Westfield's resignation from the board." The vote was unanimous except for Richard himself, who sat rigid with fury. As security escorted the elder Westfield and a shaken Cassandra from the room, Dominic addressed the remaining board members. "There will be changes moving forward, transparency, accountability, and no more decades-old vendettas dictating business decisions." Later, as they stood alone in Dominic's once again his office, Olivia felt the weight of the past weeks lifting from her shoulders. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. Dominic moved to the window, gazing out at the city sprawled below. "Professionally, we rebuild. The Riverside project is lost, but there will be others." "And personally?" Her heart raced as she asked the question that had hovered between them since their kiss in her father's office. He turned to her, all pretense stripped away. That depends on you. On me? Our contract stipulated 1 year, he reminded her, moving closer. No emotional entanglements. A business arrangement. It did, she agreed, not backing away as he approached. I'd like to propose new terms. His voice dropped lower. Indefinite duration. Full partnership. With the option for emotional entanglements. Olivia's breath caught. Are you asking me to stay married to you? For real this time? I'm asking for more than that. His hands found her waist, drawing her against him. I'm asking you to give us a chance to discover what might have happened if we'd met under different circumstances, without contracts or conspiracies. And if I agree, what would that look like? His lips curved in a genuine smile, perhaps the first she'd seen from him. It would look like dinners where we actually talk to each other, weekends where we don't discuss business, nights where ... His voice trailed off as his eyes darkened with promise. Where? She prompted, her own voice unsteady. Where I don't. Sleep in the West Wing while you sleep in the East. His forehead touched hers. Where I learn what makes you happy, what makes you sad. Where we build something honest from these dishonest beginnings. Olivia closed her eyes, feeling the solid warmth of him against her. I think, she whispered, I'd like to hear more about these terms. His kiss was nothing like their first, not desperate or born of adrenaline, but slow, deliberate, thorough. His hands framed her face with surprising tenderness, and she melted. Against him, arms winding around his neck. When they finally broke apart, breathless, the city lights had begun to twinkle in the gathering dusk. Is that a yes? He murmured against her lips. Olivia smiled, feeling truly free for the first time in years. It's a renegotiation. She kissed him again, deeper this time, feeling his arms tighten around her. Their phones remained silent. Number. Mysterious messages, no manipulations. Whatever game had been played was over. What remained was entirely their own, a beginning written not in contracts or business arrangements, but in the language of second chances and unexpected love. As night fell over the city, Dominic led Olivia from the office toward home there. Home not as a staging ground for corporate warfare, but as the foundation for something neither had dared to hope for. A marriage transformed from paper to passion, from business to beloved. The contract that had bound them was torn to pieces, replaced by promises whispered in the dark, promises neither had expected to make, yet both now intended to keep, not for a year, but for a lifetime.